Now, all right, I won't go through all of the details of this again on the fact that, yes, our troops are coming home, but we will still have a massive presence in the form of contractors and diplomats in Iraq. And so does that really mean that anything is completely finished? You've heard me make that speech before. But today, Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta got to come out and say that the Iraq war is officially over. And so the mainstream media made a big deal out of it all, as expected.
The flag is lowered and the U.S. military mission formally ends in Iraq.
After nearly 9 years, 4,500 American dead, 32,000 wounded, and more than $800 billion spent, today, the flag of the U.S. forces in Iraq was retired.
The U.S. military has formally shut down the war in Iraq, officially retiring the flag of U.S. forces.
Nearly 9 years after shock and awe, a small, somber ceremony paying tribute to America's sacrifice.
Most of the speeches focused on the sacrifices, the accomplishments that U.S. troops have been able to achieve here in Iraq since the invasion nearly 9 years ago. Just
a few thousand U.S. service members remain in Iraq. They're streaming out of the country.
You know what? I'm going to let them have that one today. Let them rejoice in the fact that the last troops will be coming home from Iraq, at least in some way. That chapter of what now has been 10 years of our global war on terror, which Iraq really had nothing to do with but ended up falling into, is closed. But do you know what happened last night that proved that this global war on terror will never really end, and it's we, the people, that ultimately will suffer from it? Well, we covered it briefly on the show, as the Obama administration had just released a statement to the press that despite all of those veto threats from the White House that they issued over the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012, they changed their minds. They decided that they won't, in fact, be doing any vetoing. Now, this would at least have been a big opportunity for the press to rail on about how the president caved on something yet again, since they love nothing more than talking political strategy and games. And despite the fact that it's not actually true, but, you know, we're going to get into that in a minute with our first interview. But seriously, you would think that, I don't know, something like this would have made a blip on the mainstream media's radar, that they would have carried through the story to today because it was a big political flop. But no dice. What's even scarier is, of course, what this NDAA actually does, thanks to the provisions added on the McCain-Levin bill that now have codified into U.S. law indefinite military detention of terrorist suspects. And that includes military detention of foreigners as well as U.S. citizens suspected in crimes related to terrorism. So basically, what this does is bring the war on terror even closer to every single one of our doorsteps. It puts the battlefield right into your own backyard, as some have said lately. It strips the entire idea from the Constitution that you have civil liberties, that you have the right to a trial by jury, to see your day in court, and to get due process. It's the same thing that we've been doing for years in Guantanamo Bay with the formal detention order that the president signed, and that's wrong either way. But we all know that us Americans, we can be a little bit insensitive about those kinds of things, thanks to the constant fear-mongering that's always thrown in our faces, to the point where people think, well, you know what? If it's the bad guys, it's those foreign terrorists, that it's okay. It's not like my government would ever do it to me. But guess what? You're wrong, because your government would totally do that to you, and now they'll be able to by law. The other incredibly scary thing that's going on here is that this means that the military, not our civilian justice system, is going to be in charge. So it's starting to sound more and more like we're getting closer to martial law by the day. The military can detain American citizens without trial. What's wrong with the court system that we already have? Nothing, actually, if you consider the fact that there have been more than 400 people in the last 10 years that have been prosecuted successfully in our federal courts for terrorism-related offenses. Military commissions, on the other hand, only 6 cases. And yet, this bill also makes sure that detainees at Guantanamo Bay can't be transferred onto U.S. soil and put on trial here. And it also continues restrictions that don't allow for detainees that have already been cleared to be transferred out. There's no logic to it. This is the war on terror not being anywhere near over, but instead being extended, being even further brought right onto U.S. soil. This is our Constitution being chipped away. This is the legacy that this president is going to leave behind. As Kenneth Roth, the executive director of Human Rights Watch, said today, by signing this defense spending bill, President Obama will go down in history as the president who enshrined indefinite detention without trial in U.S. law. So guess what, everybody? Say goodbye to that America that you once knew. And just so you know, this was a bipartisan affair. There were a few lone lawmakers on either side of the aisle that raised objections, tried to offer a few alternatives and amendments, but the overwhelming majority is totally fine with it. And of course, that's just the icing on the cake for them. Let's not forget that this massive spending bill also authorizes $622 billion towards the defense budget just for 2012. So you would think that considering this big news, this drastic change in our laws, the mainstream media would at least pretend to care just a tiny, tiny little bit. Well, while they ceremoniously mark the end of the war in Iraq, you would think that they would notice that the war here at home is being expanded. But no such luck. All of that they have somehow chosen to miss.